Hi friends, David here from Above AVL, and in this video we're going to talk all about making stuff look right on LED walls. So if you've ever started with a wall, you're working with an LED wall, you put some content on it, some video, some slides, and they look stretched, they don't fit right, they're distorted, something's not right, then this video is for you. When it comes to video walls, processors, resolutions, this stuff can get really confusing really quick. And in this video, what we want to do is break it down as simple as possible. Just a computer feeding a processor, feeding a wall, and we'll also go into offline mode to use some more standard size walls and show you how to make stuff fit. Because at the end of the day, like for example, if I just move my wall here, right? If we put text on a wall, okay, like so, right? And we've got that sitting on that wall. We want that text to look correct every time, right? How many of you have worked with a wall and something stretched, things run off the wall, or they just don't look right? Right? These things can happen. And a lot of times, if you go into your processors and you just go, on the front panel, tick, 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 this many panels up, this many panels down, boom, it's going to automatically, on a lot of settings, just stretch your canvas to your wall size. And a lot of times that's not what you want. Generally, you want whatever you're feeding it from a computer or some other kind of device to play on that wall and not be stretched horizontally or vertically, but at the same time not have black bars where you're missing stuff. And so part of that is going to come in making your content, and we'll talk about that throughout this video. But the other part is all about the mapping. So we're going to use the VMP software from Star, which any of the newer processors use, and it's a lot easier than the older software. In fact, if you're struggling with mapping, I would just go out and get a new processor. I know it costs money, but it's not that much if you have a wall, in terms of the percentage it costs. And the VMP software is just miles ahead of the older Nova LCT, though there is, it's escaping my head right now, a replacement for the older that does work with those older processors that I believe is in alpha or beta. But regardless, the VMP software is amazing. Makes it easy to map stuff, to make it look right. So let's dive in how to do that. So I'm here at my computer, and obviously I've already got things fairly mapped here into this processor, and you can see it on the screen. But what we want to look at is how to make things fit. Because obviously, the first thing is this wall, even if it was a 16:9 wall, the content is way huge. So how do we make things look right? Well, there's a number of tabs here across the top that you really want to work with, and there's a few ways to kind of slice the cake. So first thing I want to look at is the actual canvas. So we're on the first tab, layout, and canvas is the resolution of what you're putting on your LED wall, basically like the virtual screen that you're putting on your wall. Now, this isn't necessarily the resolution you're sending from your device, but it's what it's being mapped to. So for example, if I grab 1920 by 1080, I can see here that that's exactly the resolution coming out of the computer and being made for my panels. Okay, now the problem here, and you can probably see it here, and I can adjust the source if I want to, is that it's really big, right? Like my wall is only 4 panels high. They're 168 pixels. So I'm 672 pixels tall. So compared to a 1920 by 1080 signal, which is 1080 tall, I'm at about, half that, 60%, say. So you can see that's reflected here. Okay, so that's the first thing, is I would say most of the time, you want to keep your canvas size in widescreen or not. We'll talk about that in a second. But if you're doing pretty typical content, keeping the canvas in widescreen is probably your best bet in a 16:9 type format. But if your wall's pretty small and that doesn't fit well, then it's worth scaling it back. So we could go, for example, to custom here, and then it does not scale the horizontal and vertical together, but let's just say we do 720, 1280 by 720, there's the numbers. And now we've gotten a lot closer, and you can use calculators online, etc., to find, the exact resolution that's going to work. But you can see this fits our wall a lot better. If this was a full, 16 by 9-ish wall, the content would fit it really well. We'll talk more about that in a minute or two. Okay, but I'm going to move it because that's a little creepy just seeing myself back there. There's a couple ways to look at this. If you're using a 16 by 9 wall or 16 by 9-ish wall, most LED walls do not hit an exact 16 by 9 because they're made in square panels that are meters. And so unless your panel is literally 16 panels by 9 panels or a multiplier of that, the resolution's not going to be a perfect 16 by 9, right? So what do? Well, you're either going to say, okay, my wall is wider than a 16 by 9, okay, and I'm chopping off the top and bottom of the signal, or my wall is taller than a 16 by 9. Usually wider looks better than taller, but if you're going taller or slightly more square than 16 by 9, you're cutting off slivers of the side, which, interestingly enough, people less often, I think, try to stick content to the side edges. More often, they push the top and bottom edges and not the side edges as much. Regardless, I think going wider generally is more pleasing to the eye, but you can have that own discussion in your own world. But what do we do, for example, if we have a wall that's a non-standard size? So this is, say this is a square wall. Like, I know it's stepped, but say it was a 4x4 or it was a taller rectangle. Like, what's the best way to deal with this? There's going to be a couple ways to do that. Okay, first things first, if we go to the source, this is actually the HDMI input on this particular Novastar KU20. Okay, we have different 16 by 9 resolutions, and we also have the ability to go custom. Custom allows you to set a literally custom size that then is, requested basically from the computer or source. Okay, if you're using SDI inputs or HDMI to SDI converters to get your signal to your processor, then custom resolutions generally are not going to jive well. They want to stick within the standards when you're using SDI. If you're using HDMI direct, you typically can get away with stuff, or DisplayPort, etc. So in this case, I said I'm a 672 pixel square. And so it's going to let me do it. For some reason, it's not letting me go smaller than 800. So say I do 800 by 800. I do a square resolution and I hit apply. Okay. Now, my computer monitor is going to lose sync, and I've got an HDMI splitter in here, and so things get a little bit squirrely. Is it gonna let me do it? Okay, it's not gonna take it. The HDMI is not, because I have this monitor and I've got a splitter and I've got a converter going into my switcher. Okay, but in a lot of cases, you could actually set that down to a square resolution and have your computer output that. Okay, again, not going to work if you've got converters in the mix. If you've got converters, you just want to stick with the closest thing. So say, for example, I request 1024 by 768. Okay, the EDID process is not going too smoothly here because of the splitters and whatnot that I've got in there. Let me see if I can get it to be happy here in Windows Display Settings. So it's this one. Let me see if it will let me override it. Looks like it will. And they should find each other. And so now I'm running my monitor in 1024 by 768, feels like, 10 years ago. That signal's coming in. And so now I can see that I've got that signal that's much closer to my square, which is, generally going to be easier to work with. Now notice I've got black bars on the side here. Why? Because that was only my source. Okay, so the next thing to look at is the actual canvas. And so, like we said, we're 1024 by 768. I'm going to enter that here so that my canvas size perfectly matches my source size. And so there's always kind of a few places to do that to get everything to fit properly and to be happy. And it looks like I am wondering if, because I've got the canvas, I've got this. Yeah, we're still getting off of our HDMI a 1024 by 768 signal. So it's smushing. Okay, again, typically with a computer, if you get rid of the splitters, the monitors, etc., you typically could get it to actually put out that resolution, but you don't have to. Okay, and that's probably why this seems so confusing. Okay, so let's go ahead, put everything back. So we're just going to put this to 1024 by 768. We're going to put this to, 1920 by 1080. We'll put the HDMI back to that. Now my monitor is going to come back in a second and look correct. Maybe. But I set my computer to 1024 by 768. And so now we're back. We're good to go. We just have some scaling issues. So in this case, keeping the source, and a lot of times in widescreen, is going to be your best bet. Now you can have your content, which this has gotten all jacked up from the various zooming. There you go. So you can have your content full screen, Microsoft full screen. There we go. You can have your content be full screen, and this is, you see, it goes to the edges. It's beautiful. And so, now what have we done? We've gotten it back to standard resolution, but our layout on our wall is still messed up. So what I would do in this case is go ahead, put this in the upper left-hand corner, okay? Most programs, if you're gonna output a smaller resolution, you could just output that to the upper left-hand corner and then, oops, what did we do, Microsoft? And then, oh boy, this is what happens when you just open it in the image program just to make it to be lazy. And so then I could size that down to be in that corner, right? And of course, if you're doing this out of an actual presentation program like ProPresenter, like Proclaim, like Resolume, then it's going to take a lot better. But you can see here, just going, size it down, roughly matching it to my wall. And now I've got a nice image of my wall. I've got a double of myself. Kind of weird, but we've got it looking right on the screen. We're outputting a smaller section of the screen. We see background on the rest of the screen, but that's fine because when we go map it to our wall, it doesn't overlap. So let's go ahead and look at, we're just going to go here into offline mode in VMP. And this allows us to work with, I'm just going to pull myself out of there. This allows, pull my picture off of that. That allows us to look at resolutions and how it can work when you've got a wall that's not quite 16 by 9. So if you've never used this, offline mode in the VMP software is pretty cool because it just allows you to basically play around with stuff that you might be trying to make work. So I've got this, just for simplicity's sake, we're going to put the canvas in widescreen. We're going to put the source in 1920 by 1080 widescreen. There it is. Okay. Something's still big. Doesn't matter. Oh, the layer now. So with the larger processors, there's also a layer as opposed to the canvas. And so you see that this layer is also big. So if we set everything to 1920 by 1080, now everything matches up. Now let's look at what if we do a wall that is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're just going to do a typical overwide wall. Yes, I realize I'm wiring it very poorly just to make it make sense. And so let's say we build out a wall that's within this size, correct? So we're going side to side, boom. This is the rectangle. It is over wide, which means it's going to cut off the top and bottom. Okay. So the thing people do that really messes them up, that causes their image to get screwed up, is they just go either on the processor itself on the knobs or here, and they grab their layer, and they just go, okay, we're just going to scale that down to our wall. Okay, right? And then if you're looking at it, the cool thing about VMP is if you are actually looking at a wall that's hooked up, it all happens live, and boom, you're good to go, right? Or maybe you keyed it in, right? You keyed in the size manually, okay? The problem with this is that you are taking a 16:9 image or resolution from your computer or media server, and you're squashing it. And so the better thing to do, again, is, have your presentation program exporting or outputting a smaller than full size resolution so that it actually fits what you're doing. So that instead of smearing it down like this, you're just outputting within the range here. Or you just, that's the perfect way to do it. But even in a lot of circumstances, like in church use, you just are outputting stuff that is going to be, just full 16:9, but you just keep a safe zone. You just don't put text at the top. You don't put text at the bottom. This can work really well too, instead of having to build all your content at your wall size. And this especially happens if you've got like walls and projectors. And so your projectors are always getting the 16:9 image. Your walls, you'll just have to go and basically, do what we call like overscan and have the image extend past the wall, and just don't put anything important there, right? Background only, and you should be good to go. Okay. What do you do with non-standard size walls? Okay. So say, for example, we just go and we start doing something non-standard. Okay. There can be some different ways to handle that from different programs. So as I mentioned before, starting at the upper left is going to be perfect for anything, non-standard. Like say we've got like a tall rectangle, right? And we could build a wall that's this size and fill it out and wire it better in real life than we're doing here. And boom, Bob's your uncle. You're good to go. Bob's actually my uncle. But regardless, that makes it easy to rock and roll and get it moving, right? And so, don't scale things down. Don't smush things. At worst case, if you want to do something to make it fit height-wise, you've got something at a resolution, you're scaling it down, then you can go to the source, right? And you can start to scale it back. Now, again, when you drag these guys, they do get a little fooey. So you really want to, unfortunately, there's no lock that I know of because this lock literally locks the whole layer. But you're able to go ahead, you can crop if you want, which is super handy. But you can also just adjust the resolution down here manually and then keep that work. So you can make it match the canvas, you can fill the screen, but you generally don't want to do that because that's going to skew all your stuff. Okay, so the better thing to do would be, and you can see there's different options here. Oops. As to how you are able to scale it. You could scale it like that. You could scale it like this. Pixel to pixel is going to make it match the source exactly. You can have it match the canvas, which generally should match the screen. So I know that can be a lot, but essentially if you go ahead in here, the biggest gist is, because I think we've covered enough here so far, is that when you are mapping a screen, you always want to make sure that the resolution you're sending from your computer, the actual screen resolution, is what's being input into the processor, what's being put on the layer, and then what's being put on the screen. And this is independent of the actual size of the screen and what you're outputting. Okay, you can always output something smaller from a larger display, right? You can do a 2K, you could do a 4K output on a display from a computer, but you always want to have extra space on there so that you're able to size things to your panel without stretching them. That being said, we've had this question many times. People go, oh man, if I'm just over an HD LED wall, in my space, do I need a 4K processor? And if you stretch it a little, as long as it's a 1-to-1 stretch and you're not stretching tall more than sideways, it's generally fine. Sure, if you look really close, you might see it, but if it's just a little, generally not a problem. I hope you guys enjoyed this video today, just looking at some different ways to scale things, to make things work in LED walls. If you enjoyed this, we really appreciate you subscribing here. And when you need video, when you need audio, when you need lighting gear, Above AVL is your place to get it. We would love to help you get everything you need, get it in your hands, and we're dealers for lots of major brands. The other thing we do, which is awesome, is we love to sit down with you virtually and just go, hey, what do you have? What do you need? What are your goals? Find you the perfect solution and get you that personalized price. You can either email us or you can add things to your cart and request a quote. Either way, we love to help get you everything you need and get you rocking and rolling. If that sounds good, we'll see you at aboveavl.com. Thanks.